Story 1, The Mirror in the Abandoned House. They say every small town in America hides a secret. Some are harmless, and some are nightmares waiting to be remembered. Tonight, I'm taking you to a forgotten corner of Virginia, a quiet farming village, a handful of houses, and on the edge of the woods, an abandoned property no one dares to enter after dark. Why? Because at night, the silence breaks with a scream that doesn't belong to the living. Welcome to the story of the mirror in the abandoned house. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, rotting away for nearly 40 years. Windows shattered, porch caving in, roof sagging like the spine of an old man. Locals whispered about what happened there. Some swore they saw lights flickering inside. Others said they heard the cries of a woman echoing across the trees. The legend went like this. In the late 1970s, a family of 4 moved into property. The father was a carpenter, the mother a Sunday school teacher, 2 children under 10. No one remembers seeing them leave. One morning, the neighbors noticed the house had gone completely silent. The door was left open. No breakfast dishes on the table, no bags packed, no cars missing. Just emptiness. What they did find was far worse. A trail of blood leading from the kitchen door into the woods behind the property. But no bodies were ever recovered. For decades, the house stood as a curse, untouched, except by thrill seekers who wanted a scare. Most returned claiming they'd heard footsteps or whispers. A few swore they'd seen something in the upstairs window. But one thing was always mentioned, the mirror in the master bedroom. A tall, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. People said it didn't just reflect, it watched. Now, here's where the real nightmare begins. In the summer of 2003, 5 local teenagers, kids bored of small town life, decided to break into the house one Friday night. They wanted proof the stories were real. They brought flashlights, a cheap camcorder, and nerves fueled by bravado. At first, it felt like any abandoned property. Peeling wallpaper, dust thick enough to choke on, rats scurrying beneath broken floorboards. Their laughter echoed as they kicked through debris, pretending not to be afraid. But then the sound came, a single, heavy footstep on the second floor. They froze, looked at each other. No one had gone upstairs yet. One boy, Jason, tried to brush it off, probably a raccoon. His voice cracked anyway. The group argued. Some wanted to leave. Others insisted they'd come too far to chicken out. Finally, one girl, Melissa, grabbed a camcorder and said she'd prove it was nothing. She marched up the staircase, dust falling with every step. The others followed slowly, nerves fraying. Upstairs, the air was different. Heavy, colder. The hallway stretched darker than it should have, like the shadows clung to the walls. At the end, they found the master bedroom. And there it was, the mirror. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its glass cracked across the center like a jagged scar. Yet it still reflected perfectly, too perfectly. Their flashlight should have bounced faintly in the glass, but instead the mirror seemed brighter than the room itself, glowing faintly like it fed on their attention. Jason stepped forward, smirking. He waved at his reflection. It waved back, but just a fraction of a second too late. The delay was tiny, almost imperceptible. But once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. Another boy, Derek, leaned close, breathing against the glass. His reflection smiled wider than he did. Wider, too wide, stretching teeth that didn't belong to him. Melissa gasped, "Do you see that?" But Jason shook his head. "It's just a crack." Then the reflection raised its hand, but Jason hadn't moved. The reflection pressed a palm against the glass. A bloody handprint spread across the inside of the mirror. That was when the screaming started. The bedroom door slammed shut. Their flashlights flickered and died one by one. Darkness swallowed them, except for the mirror, which glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. From somewhere deep within the glass came a voice. A woman's voice whispering, at first too soft to understand, then louder. "Don't look in the mirror. Don't look in the mirror." They turned to flee, but the door wouldn't budge. Derek pounded his fists against it until they bled. Behind them, the glass cracked further, spiderwebbing as if something inside was desperate to claw its way out. Melissa dropped the camcorder. The footage, they say, survived, but it cuts off in static just before the final moments. One by one, the teenagers felt the pull. Their reflections moved without them, beckoning with twisted smiles. Jason screamed as his reflection reached through the crack, skeletal fingers wrapping around his wrist. He was yanked into the glass, his body dissolving like smoke. The others panicked, clawing at the door, crying, praying, but the mirror was hungry. Another hand broke through. This time it grabbed Derek by the face, dragging him into the void. His muffled screams faded until silence replaced them. Melissa was the last. She turned her head, refusing to look at the mirror. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered, "Please, God, don't let it take me." For a moment, the room was still. The mirror went black. The door finally swung open. Melissa stumbled out, collapsing in the hallway. She was the only one who escaped that night. 3 days later, Melissa's body was found hanging from a tree in the woods behind the house. Her eyes were gouged out, and across the bark of the tree, written in her own blood, were the words, "Don't look in the mirror." Locals swore the house has remained untouched since, but some say on nights when the wind cuts sharp through the trees, you can still hear her crying. And if you dare to enter, the mirror is still there waiting. If this story made the hairs on your neck stand up, don't let the mirror claim your silence. Smash that like button, drop a comment with your scariest experience, and most importantly, subscribe to Fearfull Horror Stories. Because trust me, this is only the beginning. Story 2, The House of Mirrors in Cádiz. They say the dead speak through mirrors. But what if the dead trap you inside them? What if you could see your own reflection, and it wasn't you looking back? This is the story of the House of Mirrors in Cádiz, Spain, a mansion so haunted, even the bravest souls avoid it. In the heart of Cádiz, nestled among centuries-old streets, stood a grand Victorian manor. Its windows were once grand, its halls filled with laughter. But now, it was a decaying relic of the past, abandoned and forgotten. Locals whispered tales of its haunted history. They called it La Casa de los Espejos, the House of Mirrors, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred, and where mirrors were said to hold more than just reflections. One stormy night, a group of urban explorers decided to uncover the truth behind the legends. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they ventured into the mansion. The air was thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. As they explored, they noticed something peculiar. Every room contained mirrors, large, ornate, and strangely positioned. Some were cracked, others covered in grime, but all seemed to draw the explorers in. They gathered in the grand hall, where a massive mirror stood at the far end. As they approached, one of the explorers, Sophia, felt an overwhelming urge to look into it. Her reflection stared back, but something was off. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too dark. Suddenly, the room grew cold. The air became thick, suffocating. The mirrors began to shimmer, and whispers filled the space. The explorers turned, but the reflections in the mirrors didn't move with them. Panic set in. They tried to leave, but the doors wouldn't open. The mirrors pulsed with an eerie light, and the whispers grew louder. Sophia screamed as her reflection reached out from the glass, grabbing her wrist. The others rushed to help, but it was too late. Sophia was pulled into the mirror, vanishing without a trace. The remaining explorers were left in stunned silence, the whispers now replaced by a haunting lullaby. The mansion was abandoned once more, but the legend of the House of Mirrors lived on. Locals claimed that on stormy nights, you could hear Sophia's voice calling from within the mirrors. Some said if you stood before the glass long enough, you could see her reflection, pleading for help. But no one dared to look too closely. If this story chilled you to the bone, don't let the mirrors trap you. Hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Fearfull Horror Stories for more tales that will keep you up at night. Remember, sometimes a reflection staring back at you isn't your own. Story 3, A Doll's House in Alabama. Some dolls are meant to be cherished. Others are meant to be feared. In a small town in Alabama, there's a house filled with dolls that move when you're not looking. A house where the line between the living and the inanimate is blurred. This is the story of the Dollhouse of Dothan. In the heart of Dothan, Alabama, stood a quaint Victorian house. From the outside, it appeared ordinary. White picket fence, blooming garden, and lace curtains in the windows. But inside, the house was anything but typical. Every room was filled with dolls. Antique porcelain dolls, Raggedy Ann dolls, ventriloquist dummies, and even life-size mannequins. They sat on shelves, stood in corners, and lay in beds. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow visitors as they moved through the house. The owner, Miss Evelyn, was an elderly woman who had lived in the house for decades. She claimed to have a special connection with each doll, saying they were her children. Neighbors often heard her talking to them, and some swore they saw the dolls blink or shift positions when no one was around. One summer, a group of college students decided to investigate the rumors surrounding Miss Evelyn's house. Armed with cameras and notepads, they arrived at the house one afternoon. Miss Evelyn welcomed them with a warm smile and invited them inside. As they toured the house, the students couldn't help but feel uneasy. The dolls seemed to be everywhere, their eyes unblinking and unblinking. In the parlor, a large mirror reflected the room, but the dolls in the reflection were positioned differently than in reality. In the dining room, a doll sat at the head of the table, its hands folded neatly in front of it. Miss Evelyn explained that the dolls were her family, each one with its own personality and backstory. She spoke of them as if they were alive, recounting tales of their adventures and misadventures. The students listened politely, though they couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As evening approached, the students prepared to leave. Miss Evelyn insisted they stay for dinner, and they reluctantly agreed. During the meal, the conversation turned to the supernatural. Miss Evelyn shared stories of strange occurrences in the house, objects moving on their own, whispers in the night, and the dolls changing positions when no one was looking. The students laughed nervously, attributing the tales to the old woman's imagination. But as the night wore on, they began to feel an unsettling presence in the house. The temperature dropped, and the air grew thick with tension. One of the students, Sarah, felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder, but when she turned, no one was there. Later that night, the students decided to conduct a seance to communicate with the spirits in the house. They gathered around the dining table, holding hands and chanting softly. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. In the pitch-black room, the students heard soft giggles and the sound of footsteps approaching. A doll's voice whispered, "Play with me." The students screamed and scrambled to turn on the lights. When the lights flickered back on, the dolls were gone. They had moved. Some were now standing in the doorway, others on the stairs, and a few were sitting at the table, staring at the students with their unblinking eyes. Panicked, the students rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. The windows were sealed shut, and the house seemed to be alive, trapping them inside. The dolls began to move, slowly at first, then faster, their heads turning to follow the students' every move. The next morning, the house was silent. The students were found outside, huddled together and trembling. They couldn't remember how they escaped or what had happened during the night. When they returned to the house to gather their belongings, it was empty. Miss Evelyn was gone, and the dolls were nowhere to be found. Some say the house is still there, hidden in the woods, waiting for its next visitors. Others claim the dolls have found new homes, but their eyes still follow you wherever you go. Story 4, The Whispering Walls of Selma. In the heart of Alabama lies a town where the past refuses to stay buried. Selma, known for its rich history, also harbors a dark secret, a house with walls that whisper, floors that creak with the weight of sorrow, and a legacy that haunts the living. This is the story of the haunted mansion in Selma, where every brick holds a tale of tragedy and every shadow hides a secret. Selma, Alabama, is a town steeped in history. From its role in the Civil War to the Selma to Montgomery marches, the town has witnessed pivotal moments in American history. But amidst the historic landmarks and antebellum homes lies a mansion with a reputation that sends chills down the spine of even the bravest souls. The mansion, built in the mid-1800s, was once the residence of a prominent family. Its grand architecture and sprawling grounds made it the envy of the town. But beneath its opulent exterior, the mansion harbored a dark secret. Tragedy struck when the family's youngest daughter, Emily, fell ill with mysterious fever. Despite the best efforts of local physicians, she succumbed to the illness within days. Devastated, her parents locked themselves away in grief, and the mansion was abandoned. Years passed, and the mansion fell into disrepair. Its once beautiful gardens became overgrown, and the windows, once gleaming, were now shattered. But the mansion's reputation as a haunted house grew, attracting thrill-seekers and paranormal investigators. One such investigator, Sarah, decided to spend a night in the mansion to uncover the truth behind the rumors. Armed with her equipment, she entered the mansion as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air inside was thick with dust, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. As she set up her equipment in the grand hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As midnight approached, Sarah began to hear faint whispers emanating from the walls. At first, she dismissed them as the house settling, but the whispers grew louder, forming coherent words. "Emily, Emily," the walls seemed to chant. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the hall, extinguishing her candles. The temperature dropped, and Sarah's breath became visible in the frigid air. Determined to uncover the source, Sarah ventured upstairs. The hallway was lined with portraits of family, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. At the end of the hallway stood Emily's room, its door ajar. As Sarah entered the room, she was struck by an overwhelming sense of sorrow. The room was frozen in time, with a child's toys scattered across the floor and a rocking chair gently swaying. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The whispers intensified, now accompanied by the sound of soft footsteps approaching. "Emily," a voice whispered in her ear. Panicked, Sarah tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around her. Just as she thought she would succumb to the darkness, the door flew open, and she stumbled into the hallway. The whispers ceased, and the temperature returned to normal. Sarah fled the mansion, vowing never to return, but the whispers followed her, echoing in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was still there, waiting for someone to listen. To this day, the mansion stands in Selma, its windows dark and silent. But those who pass by at night swear they can hear the faint whispers of a child calling out from within. Story 5. The Forgotten Asylum of Pineville. They say some places are abandoned for a reason, and some are abandoned because the memories within them refuse to die. Pineville Asylum, a forgotten mental institution in rural Louisiana, is one such place. Its hallways echo with the cries of the long-forgotten, and its rooms still smell of despair. Tonight, I'm taking you inside to witness the horrors that even time could not bury. The asylum was built in 1924 on the outskirts of Pineville, Louisiana. Its red brick facade and towering spires gave a sense of grandeur, masking the dark history inside. For decades, patients suffering from severe mental illnesses were confined within its walls. Treatments were experimental, cruel, and inhumane. Electroshock therapy without anesthesia, isolation chambers, and strange experimental drugs were common. The townsfolk whisper about screams that could be heard from the forest at night. Some claim that patients were never truly treated, that they simply disappeared, swallowed by the asylum itself. By 1972, the asylum was abruptly shut down. Some say a fire destroyed parts of the building, though no official record could explain why it was abandoned so suddenly. Today, the building stands as a decaying skeleton, overgrown with weeds, and locals refuse to go near it after sundown. On a humid summer night, 3 urban explorers, Mark, Elena, and Joseph, decided to investigate the asylum. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a false sense of bravery, they crossed the rusted gates. The air smelled of mold and decay, thick enough to taste. Broken windows cast eerie shadows across the peeling walls. Graffiti and decades of dust seemed to scream at them to leave, but curiosity pushed them further. As they entered the main hall, the floorboards groaned underfoot, echoing through the empty corridors. The walls were lined with peeling paint and old photographs of patients whose eyes seemed to follow their every step. Mark whispered, "It's too quiet," almost like the building itself is watching. Elena shivered. "Let's just check the therapy rooms quickly and get out." They moved from room to room, documenting the remnants of the asylum. Empty beds, rusted wheelchairs, broken syringes. In one chamber, they discovered a diary, yellow with age, detailing the experiments performed on a patient known only as Patient 47. According to the diary, Patient 47 began seeing others that weren't really there, voices, shadows, and a presence in the mirrors that no one could explain. As they climbed the main staircase, they heard faint footsteps above them. Joseph froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked. A door at the end of the hall creaked open by itself. The air grew cold and a soft whisper filled the corridor. "Get out, you shouldn't be here." Elena's flashlight flickered. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Mark tried to laugh it off, but even he could feel the oppressive weight of something unseen pressing in around them. They entered the west wing, the oldest part of the asylum. Here, the walls were covered in scratches, as if patients had clawed at the surfaces in desperation. A faint smell of blood lingered, mixing with mildew and rot. Suddenly, Joseph screamed. He pointed at the far end of the hallway. A figure, a patient, pale, hollow-eyed, barely more than a shadow, stared at them. It moved jerkily, almost like a puppet on invisible strings. "Run," Elena shouted, but the door slammed shut before they could reach them. In panic, they tried to find another exit. The corridors twisted unnaturally, and the asylum seemed larger than the map suggested. Echoing cries surrounded them, overlapping voices calling names, whispering threats, and moaning in despair. They reached a room that had once been the electroshock therapy chamber. The table was still there, rusted and stained. The room pulsed with a cold energy. Shadows began moving independently, forming figures that circled them. Mar tried to record everything, but the camera kept flickering, each time revealing glimpses of faces pressed against the walls, screaming silently. Suddenly, the room went pitch black. In the darkness, they could feel breath on their necks and hear the whispers grow louder. "Join us, stay forever." Elena grabbed Mark's arm, screaming. They saw the figure of Patient 47 materialize from a corner of the room, dragging itself toward them. Its eyes glowed faintly, filled with malice and sorrow. In sheer desperation, Joseph smashed a window with a fire extinguisher. They climbed out, cutting themselves on the broken glass, but finally escaped into the humid Louisiana night. The asylum remained behind them, silent, yet they could feel it watching, waiting. The voices and shadows never left their minds. That night, Pineville's long-forgotten asylum claimed its next victims, not with death, but with fear that would never release them. Some say the spirits of the asylum still roam the halls, waiting for anyone daring enough to enter again. And if you ever hear whispers calling your name in the night, maybe you've already been noticed. If this story made the hairs on your neck stand up, smash that like button. Leave a comment about your scariest experience and subscribe to Fearfull Horror Stories. Remember,